It's Tuned to Yesterday, broadcasting shows from radio's golden era. I'm Mark Lavonier. True history in this hour, later on from the You Are There series, dramatizing the events of March 23rd, 1775. But right now it's Memoirs of the Movies, released in 1961 for syndication. Stage and screen actor Franchot Tone is our host for this episode, focusing in on the film factories of Hollywood's early days.
Group W, the Westinghouse Broadcasting Company, now presents Memoirs of the Movies, an 18-part series of recollections of the world of Hollywood, produced in cooperation with the Oral History Research Project of Columbia University. Tonight, part 5 in our series, The Film Factories. And here to tell you about the studios as they were in their heyday, Miss Myrna Loy.
I have been in and out of motion picture studios all of my adult life. And I think it's fair to say they're a bit like circuses, with all 3 rings going. There's a lot of excitement and craziness and hard work and a tremendous esprit de corps, because no one person could do his or her job without everyone else. During the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s, the big studios ruled the motion picture business with an iron hand. There was Universal, Paramount, Warner's, Columbia, 20th Century, Fox, RKO, Republic, and of course, the MGM. Each of those studios owned a chain of theaters, so they all turned out 50 or 60 pictures a year on a production line schedule. To keep grinding out pictures, they had to make sure their actors were dependable. They made us sign contracts that were very, very specific in what we could and could not do, and they worked us very hard. And some of us found those contracts very oppressive. The recollections you are about to hear were spoken in 1959, and since that time, Basil Rathbone, Jerry Wald, and Ben Hecht, whom you will hear, have died. So also has our host, Franchot Tone, who was one of Hollywood's most debonair romantic leads. Here he is to take you back in time to the glorious, notorious film factories of Hollywood.
I remember the movies the way they used to be. Do you? Do you remember those lush, over-decorated pictures of the 30s where the bedrooms all had white walls? And remember those fast-talking melodramas with characters right off the front page? Each picture was a hallmark of a different studio, a different school of movie-making. And were the pictures better then, or does it just seem that way to me in retrospect? Financially speaking, a motion picture studio is a factory geared to a rigid schedule of demands by retail outlets, the movie theaters of the world. The studio is also said by some who have worked in it to resemble a jail and a circus. The big windowless sound stages, the bungalows, crowds of costumed actors, animals, and grease paint, a world of celluloid fantasy in a cell block. Orson Welles remarked that a movie studio is the biggest electric train any boy ever had to play with. It is filled with the most magical kind of gadgets for creating the illusion of reality on film. Even the most doubting visitor is impressed, including one actor who went out in 1935 to make his first film, Henry Fonda.
I was fascinated. For instance, my first picture, I had done this part in the theater. The Farmer Takes a Wife. Most of it's an exterior story, so if you're going to put this in a preceding opening stage, you have to make it look like outdoors, and the cut-out trees, and there was a canal, the old Erie Canal. It was late on the Erie Canal, but you couldn't see the water, but you had to suggest that up over a bank there would be water, and this canal barge was pulled through. Well, you know, at best, it's stagey. Now, making the same part, playing the same part in the same story in the movies, it was an amazing thing because there was really water. It was really outdoors and hot sun. There was a real canal barges, and horses pulling them along the towpath. And you would jump off the barge onto the shore and run across the bridge and into the hotel across the porch. And if you went into the blacksmith shop, if he was really there with a big fire and, banging his hammer and so on, it was real.
There's one fact which every single person in the motion picture industry accepts as gospel truth. That is, that the real geniuses of Hollywood are the technicians, the experts in makeup, lights, props, process photography. They're the ones who make tired stars look young, who make giants walk the earth and great cities go up in flames. A few of these rugged old-timers are fondly recalled by director Joseph L. Mankiewicz.
In those days, a grip, an electrician, a prop man, these artisans had as much security, more security than the star who was under a 5-year contract. They were there for life. These grips knew that until they died, they'd be working at Paramount. And they were part of these Paramount crews. And there was a tremendous loyalty in these crews. Some of our prop men today are second and third generation prop men. The Delfino at Fox was a master prop man whose father was a master prop man. And he inherited his father's prop box. Prop box is a wonderful thing to behold. This was the real permanence in film. Stars came and went. But the grip and the electrician and the gaffer, they were there. And this was their studio.
Henry Fonda and Joe Mankiewicz were still impressed by what the technicians in Hollywood can create. Let's take a peek onto one of the sound stages of a few years ago. It's brightly lit, crowded with actors and grips and electricians and camera crew. The picture's being made in Spanish.
The next two pictures I did were in Spanish. Now, I met a very remarkable fellow there. He and I were made into a kind of a unit to this effect. They wanted to make pictures in Spanish, specifically to be shown in South America.
Unusual, but perhaps revealing the day-to-day routines. The speaker is Henry Myers, author of $1 Million Legs and countless features.
And I don't speak any language but English. I wrote the thing in English, and they were translated into Spanish, and he directed them. Let me tell you one little anecdote about the Spanish pictures. A correspondent of some newspaper, I think it's probably a Spanish-speaking paper, came around to interview me on the set one day. I don't understand it, he said. How do you manage this, turning it from English into Spanish and all that? What is this setup? Who does the translating? Who oversees it? I said, well, it's very simple. I said, first, there is the author who speaks English but no Spanish. The director who speaks English but no Spanish. There's a man named Ribalta who speaks Spanish and a broken English and translates it to the actors who speak Spanish but no English. I said, and over all of these are the producers and executives who speak neither Spanish nor English.
A typical day in a small studio where pandemonium was normal. It was all fun and games if you didn't much care about artistic integrity and accepted the fact that movies are a business. And the movie studio was a great big factory despite all the wonderful nonsense. If you did care, you could suffocate. You came in conflict sooner or later with many of the studio executives. Director Otto Preminger recalls the smothering paternalism of the studio.
What happens when you were under contract and when you were successful was that while the direct pressure was not too big, it was polite. I mean, sometimes you were forced to use an actor you didn't like to use because the studio couldn't provide another actor, but it was always on a very democratic and sensible basis. However, because the studio heads expressed themselves very strongly about their likes and dislikes, when you looked for stories, subconsciously you started to look for stories which the studio head would rather approve of like. You wanted subconsciously at least to avoid fights. You know, this was the way how one single man put the stamp of his personality on the whole studio, and this was the reason that they developed a certain sameness in the product of these studios, which eventually, under the pressure of competition with television, led to the breakup, or at least to the partial breakup of the major studio operation, and led to the new form, which I think is only another form.
And Otto Preminger was not alone in feeling cramped by a studio. Remember our most appealing youngster in How Green Was My Valet and My Friend Flicker, Roddy McDowell, now grown up? He looks back on his attempts to keep his individuality.
I'm a tremendous movie fan. I think the art of the motion picture is something extraordinary. The joys of making a motion picture, as long as it's good, are unique and quite wonderful and supreme in their way. But you can't mechanize an art. You can't, and it's been done, or was done, which is a dichotomy involved. And the moment you start to, and you get a huge, one of those great big studios with all those, it sounds deprecating, and in a way it is, to say all those businessmen heading it, chaos is going to break loose. Now, looking at it from their angle, they're right, because they've got a multi-million-dollar investment they have to keep solvent, and so they've got a problem of their own. But as an actor, you've got a problem too, which is in direct opposition to them. It's very difficult to sustain or to expand your abilities. I don't think necessarily because you act well one year that you are able to act well the next year, because I think acting is directly the result of the life, and you are only as good as your needs. So you can get lost and you can drown very easily in the atmosphere of a big mechanized corporation.
The career of a movie actor or actress might seem to be a glittering round of parties, premieres, and luxurious living. Perhaps it was for one or two. But it could also be a damaging, destructive deal for the individual who became a mere pawn in the hands of the publicity mill. According to Basil Rathbone,
there is an actress, and I would prefer not to mention her name, because I don't think name calling means anything anyway. But there is an actress who waited upon me many times ago in the Brown Derby restaurant. She was a waitress. She is now one of the most important stars in Hollywood. She rose from the waitress in the Brown Derby to stardom in about 18 months. Now, it seems to me that if you have had virtually nothing and you suddenly find yourself riding around in a Cadillac car with clothes and adulation, that you must needs to have a most exceptional character. And even if you have, I think it's hard to take. I think it's that it happens too fast. I think stardom and luxury living, and then it seems to be that this is a demand of the studios. One of the great assets of the entertainment world for me should be mystery.
yes, the price of success was high when you entered the winner's circle at the star-studded stable. Furthermore, audiences loved to see a person in a familiar role, and they were roles, too. The gangsters, society girls, and adventurers. But for an actor, well, it was damaging, to say the least.
They had, as you know, a stock company. It's become that name. There was Guy Kibbe, Glenda Farrell, Joan Blondell, Dick Powell, a whole lot of very nice and attractive people.
Here's a glimpse of Warner Brothers from a fine actress, Miss Eileen McMahon.
They made an effort, naturally, to use their stock company. At that time, they didn't call us stock company. They said we were stars. And therefore, in a measure, you had to catch the next vehicle that came along as if you were catching the next trolley. There could be very little planning under those circumstances. But my contract called for planning for about 3 years. And it was very profitable and very pleasant, except that, being a stock company and having made a hit in certain fields with certain pictures and certain people, they wanted to repeat the same pictures with the same people. And it finally worked out that you were almost playing the same part with the same lines and the same clothes. And inasmuch as I had set out to be an actress, I found that very tiresome.
One of the studio's prime assets was bigness. Only in a big studio could Atlanta burn and San Francisco fall to pieces. And there was one studio that grew into an opulent complex of wondrous sets and stages, a city within a city, the luxurious Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
I know at one time at Metro there were something like 67 writers under contract. Must have been 40 directors, and heaven knows how many actors and actresses. It must have been 110.
For a glimpse of the studio's enormous human assets, here's the writer-director George Seaton. a distinguished alumnus of MGM.
And when you think of the stable, it included Garbo, Joan Crawford, Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Marie Dressler, Wallace Beery. You had a pretty good well of talent to dip from. Of course, then they could afford in those days to take somebody like a fellow called Arlington Brugg, became Robert Taylor, and nurse him along and use him in shorts, because they were also making shorts in those days, which is another form of pictures which is gone completely. And they would let him play 2 lines here and 3 lines there and nurse him along, publicize him, and then finally let him go into a feature picture. But they built him up, which no studio can afford to do today. And I don't think there's even the inclination, because the major studio as such is a thing of the past.
That, briefly, was MGM. Meanwhile, over in Burbank, another studio was grinding them out like a hectic newspaper office getting out late editions.
When I was a writer to as hard as a writer, and worked as a writer from 32.
Harry Wald, then a scenario writer, recalls the exciting Warner Brothers of the 30s.
There was quite an exciting studio. It was exciting because Donald Zanuck at the time was running the studio. He was executive producer, and I was a writer, and Jack Warner was the vice president in charge of production. And I remember distinctly being called in once and saying that we could not compete with Metro with a tremendous stable of stars, so we had to go after the stories, topical stories, not typical ones. And the stories became the stars. And out of these stories, though, emerged, because of the vitality and the tremendous push and the timeliness of the stories, stars emerged. The Jimmy Cagneys, Edward G. Robinson, the Munis, the Johnny Garfield, Bogart. And Warner's went in for stories that were topical and not typical. And they made them, we used to say TTT, timely, topical, and not typical. That was our slogan.
By way of contrast, here is Miss Anita Luce, scenario writer for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer under the aegis of producer Irving Thalberg.
The pictures have never been as good as they were in those days. And although money was thrown away like crazy, money came in like crazy, too, and American films dominated the whole world. I remember that one time I was working on a story with Irving, and we used to wait for story conferences. And sometimes we would wait for 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. And while I was waiting, I was knitting a scarf. And by the time the scarf was finished, I figured it had cost MGM about $70,000. And it wasn't a very big scarf at that.
Imagine 5 years on a single picture. But even now, it's hard to condemn the big studios. They were as unique, nonsensical, rich, and vanished as the court of Louis XIV. All their former inmates recall them with nostalgia and amusement.
They were the movie man studio in the sense that they were just dedicated to the great tradition, the romantic tradition. They went in for the romantic story, the great spectacle, and the great stars.
Listen to Leo Rustin, screenwriter, recalling the palmiest days.
The roster of stars they had was unbelievable. They carried them. Star might do one picture a year. That didn't seem to worry them very much because they knew what these people were worth. They would not lend them out, for instance. And they developed this, I think, as unequal collection of star talent, director talent, and writing talent. Now, they had 120 writers under contract, full-time. And many of the writers there wouldn't get their name on the screen more than once every 18 months or every years. They were perfectionists in their way. It was not unusual at Metro for 6 different writers to be working on a story in teams of 2. At Warner's, you almost never got this. For instance, at Warner's, there was one man, Hal Wallace. He read every darn script. And he would make his comments and just cut this scene and change this, and I don't like the motivation here, and that was that. At Metro, there would be conferences for weeks between the writers and the director. Then, and the producer. Then the producer would go to an executive producer. And one had the feeling there from the writers that it was a vast, indulgent, money-spending studio.
The bread and butter of any studio was its actors, who ran the gamut from the faithful old-time bit players to the highly bred temperamental stars whose names appeared above the title. There was a generation of players who literally grew up there. The Metro of Louis B. Mayer is recalled by Miss Bonita Granville, one of Andy Hardy's many girlfriends, and a young star of Hitler's Children.
I was at Metro for a couple of years, I guess, and I was under contract at the same time with Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, and Mr. Mayer had at the studio facilities for teaching singing and dancing and acting lessons and all things like that. He was one of the first to do all the grooming things for stars. He really groomed stars, and he was the first one who started with all the lessons and having the facility right there on at the studio lot. He even had a masseuse for girls and a dietitian for girls who tended to get overweight and taught them and a costume consultant to teach you how to dress if you needed it, and whatever was needed, it was provided for someone that they felt had talent of becoming a big star. Now, this, of course, was a great, great help, and this has now become almost extinct because there aren't a lot of people under contract.
A studio was a way of life to many children who grew up within its sheltered walls. But for those who came late, the lunacy was almost engulfing.
I don't think there is any institution in the world like MGM for idiocy, ineptness, the wrong man in the wrong job.
Here is writer Ben Hecht.
MGM almost single-handed didn't think itself, but all of Hollywood, because it set the pattern. It set the pattern for who was great, who was important. I used to work there. Once I got $10,000 a week working at MGM. The man I worked for got $2,000 a week. And he had to say over changing anything I did. And I would say to him, why do you want me to write bad stuff instead of good stuff? What is it in you that makes you unerringly go for something that's corny? It's box office. Now, in those days, they had an answer for you because they would open the big book called the Ledger, and they would show you they were making money in the theaters. They would back up any story statement or plot statement by taking you to Joe Cohen's office and showing you that their last picture had made $1 million. Now, MGM's scheme of making movies was possibly the most Humpty Dumpty notion that ever hit the entertainment world. Movies were made by people who not only didn't know how to make movies, didn't know how to look at them, were for the main part illiterate. I'd say 2/3 of the people I saw in Metro over 10 years weren't fit to run a candy store or a clothing store with a $300 a week overhead.
But somehow they turned out 104 feature pictures a year. Does laughter still echo through the halls of the studios that now make television pictures? Well, there was plenty of laughter in the old days. Among the humorists who sat around the lunch tables and drank the studio coffee was some of the century's best raconteurs.
Each studio tried to assert a certain superiority. MGM regarded itself in the 20s and the 30s as hors concours. Nothing was more exalted in the hierarchy of movies than MGM.
Listen now to Mark Connolly, author of Captains Courageous and Merton of the Movies, recalling the lunatic fringe that sometimes seemed to run right down the middle.
The commissary at the MGM seemed to have a little more elegance than the commissaries and the others. Paramount was pretty good. 20th Century Fox had its own personality. I'm thinking commissaries now. Columbia, and in the days of Harry Cohen, was regarded as just a miniature nightmare. Cohen might come rushing in, as he did one day, to Charlie Lederer, the writer's table at Columbia, only seated about 6 or 7. And Cohen came rushing in, hot with concern about an argument he'd been having elsewhere on astronomy, in which he didn't seem to feel too certain. He came rushing in, grabbed Charlie, swung him around from his lunch, and said, "Charlie, how high is the moon?" That kind of thing could happen.
The star-studded stable, the winter quarters for a circus, the strangler of talent and individuality, such was the motion picture studio, depending on where you sat. I can't deny that movies have improved in many ways under the current system of independent production. Still, the studios did have charm. I may be old-fashioned, but that's the way it seems to me in my weaker moments.
That was Franchot Tone speaking in 1959. I'm Myrna Loy. It seems to me that since those stories about the Hollywood studios were told, attitudes have mellowed a bit. I think there are many young filmmakers who have new respect for the films that came out of the big studios. They might even welcome a chance to make movies for a studio that provided them with talent in every field. And it's very sad that the wonderful old back blocks are standing idle. It was tremendous fun working in those life-size towns and streets and foreign settings. But the old order must change, and it is much more convincing to film a scene in Rome or Paris or Hong Kong. Well, next time, we'll have some very fascinating stories about how films are made and the very special technique of acting for the camera and what makes a star in the first place. I'll be there, too. Thank you all very much.
Memoirs of the Movies, on Tuned to Yesterday, a syndicated recording from 1961. Franchot Tone, our host for the program, picked up an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor for his role in 1935's Mutiny on the Bounty, though, like several stars who had long movie and TV careers, his romantic roles and stories off-screen threatened to overshadow his fame as an actor. From his explosive 1930s marriage to Joan Crawford and entanglements with Bette Davis to his early 1950s near-death experience with actor Tom Neal, whose violence effectively ended his own career and led Tone to get plastic surgery. You're listening to an hour of true history on Tuned to Yesterday. I'm Mark Lavonier. And now we'll hear the events of March 23, 1775, as if CBS Radio News was actually there covering it in the series You Are There. News broadcasting legend Walter Cronkite plays a big part in this episode called The Resolve of Patrick Henry, first heard on January 17, 1954.
March 23, 1775. The Resolve of Patrick Henry. You are there.
Walter Cronkite reporting March 23, 1775. In Richmond, Virginia today, a convention of delegates representing the widest popular expression of opinion in that colony is meeting to decide Virginia's next step in the growing revolt of the 13 colonies against British rule. Virginia has been a prime mover in organizing rebellion against the various forms of British imposition. The decisions made by this convention will directly affect the immediate course of action of all of the colonies. What makes decision extremely difficult at this time is the fact that no reply has yet been made by the King to the petition submitted to him by the recent Congress which met in Philadelphia. The fundamental issue is the question of the colonists' rights on taxation, trade, and self-government in their own affairs. Will the King grant the necessary reforms, or will he dispatch his powerful forces to drown the upstart rebellion in a torrent of blood? We take you now to Richmond, Virginia. All things are as they were then, except you are there.
This is Ned Chalmer in St. John's Church in Richmond. The convention has chosen this church for its meeting since Lord Dunmore, the King's governor, has denied the use of government property. Up to now, the business at hand has been conducted without much controversy, most of the matters being of a preliminary nature. But inevitably, the question of military preparation had to be faced. This body must determine whether or not to recognize and unify the local forces who have begun arming and drilling of the militia. A resolution is being introduced on this question by the delegate from Hanover, Patrick Henry. Mr. Henry is the most outspoken advocate in Virginia of forcible resistance to British rule, and he has tremendous popular support. With this resolution, it appears he means to feel out and test the true temper of the delegates.
Resolved that the establishment of such a militia is at this time particularly necessary because of the state of our laws and the known remissness of the British government to call us together in a legislative capacity at this time of danger and distress. We must secure our inestimable rights and liberties from any further violation with which they are threatened. Resolve, therefore, that this colony be immediately put into a posture of defense, and that a committee be appointed to plan for the arming and disciplining of such a number of men as may be necessary for that purpose. Mr. President, I move the adoption of this resolution.
Gentlemen, you will all be heard. Let us come to order, please. Before we begin debate on the motion, there will be a short recess.
Mr. Henry, could we have a word with you? Apparently, we'll have to wait until Mr. Henry has a little more leisure. Aren't you Mr. Jefferson? Mr. Jefferson, sir?
Thomas Jefferson, at your service, sir.
Mr. Jefferson, are you in agreement with this resolution to arm Virginia?
I am. I helped prepare it.
Then why didn't you present it yourself, sir?
I shall argue for it later, if necessary. Mr. Henry lights the fires. We keep them burning. That's important, too, you know.
But isn't it true that you have at times voiced a certain contempt for Mr. Henry?
Mr. Henry and I are old friends. There was a time when, as a much younger man, I regarded Mr. Henry's unpolished manners and lack of education with deplorable snobbery.
We all did. We learned better.
Your face is familiar, sir, but I'm sorry I don't know your name.
George Washington.
Oh, of course, sir. You don't appear or speak very often, Mr. Washington, yet you have a reputation for great wisdom. How is that possible?
I really don't know, sir. And may I add that if I do have such a reputation, it frightens me.
Well, Mr. Washington, do you support the resolution to arm Virginia?
I see no other way to impress upon His Majesty the seriousness of our demands.
How far do you think this rebellion can go without war?
With the blockade and military occupation of Massachusetts, we are at war now. The question is, do we support Massachusetts? Do we unify? Do we organize to resist?
Are you talking of independence, sir? Complete independence?
No, I am still talking of reform within the concept of British dominion.
Well, do you intend to raise the question of independence?
Do we, Mr. Washington?
If the majority of the people want complete independence, and a great many already do, I would raise the question or support those who did.
And I would oppose it. You go too far, gentlemen. You want to arm for revolution, not, as you say, for security. This is the true meaning of Mr. Henry's proposals. They are the next step in a calculated conspiracy led by Sam Adams and his Boston radicals. Why do you press for military measures now, at the very moment when there is the greatest reason to believe that the king will grant our demands? Why do you seek to destroy this well-based hope we have of peaceful adjustment?
Is there hope, Mr. Pendleton? That is indeed the question.
You don't want the king to meet
the
our
charge
demands.
made by Mr. Pendleton of a connection between the Jefferson-Henry group here and the Sam Adams group in Boston is undeniably true. We take you now to Boston and Don Hollenbeck for a prearranged interview with the controversial Mr. Adams himself.
Yes, we're in touch with affairs in Virginia. We're in constant communication with all the colonies. That is the work of the committees of correspondence.
Well, then, the Virginia Convention was called with your knowledge.
What is your purpose in these questions, sir? Are you delicately trying to suggest that we are in a conspiracy to organize resistance? Well, we are. Open and covert. Let us settle that question. We have been corresponding, scheming, planning for many years, long before we dumped all that fine tea in Boston Harbor.
So you hope the convention will instill the spirit of rebellion in Virginia as strong as it now exists in Boston. Is that it?
No. No, that is a vain hope. Boston is under military occupation and rule. Virginia is not. The tyrant is here. Struts through our streets with a well-fed, well-armed arrogance. Our meetings are forbidden. Our port is blockaded. In short, we are in the process of being suppressed by all measures of actual violence. Since we will not submit, the violence must come too, and it will soon. What we ask of Virginia is that she abandon all illusions of conciliation with the Crown, support us, and prepare her own resistance.
You speak openly of revolution and independence here. In Virginia, all protest is still made in the form of allegiance to the Crown. Isn't that a fundamental difference?
It is, but the king will soon resolve all such differences.
How so?
By resisting reforms. By answering with force, he has made independence and revolution the only possible solution for us.
Well, why should the king and his advisors invite such a catastrophe to themselves?
It will only be a disaster if we win. We can lose. If Virginia does not take a firm stand now, the other colonies will waver. Massachusetts will be left alone. We cannot win alone. Our progress towards elementary liberties, not to speak of independence, would be wiped out. We could be set back 50 years.
Then you'd say that what decisions are made in Virginia will be crucial.
You follow me at last, sir.
Who in Virginia would see the problem as you do?
Those who sweat and toil in the tobacco fields and in the towns, from whose labors our absent British lords and ladies so handsomely profit. They, I am sure, see the problem even more clearly than I do. Among our less impoverished friends in Virginia, I most esteem Washington, Jefferson, Lee, Patrick Henry.
And of these, who must now lead?
They must all lead, and they will. Washington has a quality of selfless, precise judgment. Jefferson is mighty with his pen. At the moment, they need most a voice, earnest and powerful, tuned to the minds and hearts of their people. And they have it. Patrick Henry is that voice.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. We return you now to Richmond, Virginia. Come in, Ned Calmer. The recess ended a few minutes ago, and debate on the resolution has begun. The gentleman speaking now is Colonel Richard Bland, said to be the leader of the more conservative delegates.
Certain measures, strong measures. An address and petition was sent to the king. A further measure was introduced and passed to stop the importation of British goods and to compel this by the election of local committees of safety and inspection. I did then, and do now, support the action undertaken as just and proper in this contest for our most natural rights. Now, even before we have had any opportunity to know the full effects of these measures on the king's attitude, we are being asked to virtually declare war. That is the import of Mr. Henry's resolution. I must ask you, Mr. Henry, wherein lies the necessity for such haste and provocation? We have just received a report which was printed 2 days ago in our own Williamsburg Gazette, and I quote, "The buzz at court is that all the acts will be repealed and that Lord North and Dartmouth will be replaced by Gower and Hillsborough. We have further well-substantiated information that the merchants of London and Liverpool and other cities have petitioned the king on our behalf and on theirs to grant our demands. You are aware, Mr. Henry, that our claims have support in Parliament as well and are being pressed by such distinguished men as Lord Chatham and Edmund Burke. In such circumstances, is it not reasonable to conclude that your resolution is rash and premature? It is my earnest judgment that the pressures we have exerted upon the Crown will result in a withdrawal and reversal of the obnoxious policies now in force. We have every right at this time to hope for an attitude of peace and full conciliation, to avoid a war which we could only lose, to achieve an honorable peace which is now clearly possible. I urge you to vote against this unhappy resolution."
I agree with Colonel Mr. Pendleton has the floor.
I will be brief, gentlemen. Colonel Bland has spoken most of my mind. We must know where we stand, precisely where we stand on this resolution as on all others to come. And we must know the consequences of our actions. I, too, must ask Mr. Henry a pertinent question. Apparently, Mr. Henry's manners have not yet improved to the point of elementary courtesy. I will address my question in this case.
Mr. Henry, why did you leave the debate just now?
Pendleton won't say anything new. I'll have to speak soon. Colonel Bland is the man we have to convince. If he agrees, they'll all agree. He is sober and reasonable. That's just the problem. Very tough to persuade that kind.
Then you found his arguments against the resolution effective?
Effective enough to give me chills.
Is there any merit, in your opinion, in the hope for peace?
It's a false and dangerous hope arising out of fear.
What fear, sir?
The fear of the invincible Colossus, England, and the fear that we are moving toward revolution and independence.
Why should that be a fear?
We cannot enlist Americans in a war against the Crown without, at the same time, creating a new order of freedom and equality here at home. Colonel Bland would like to throw off the British yoke, but not give up his privileges of American aristocracy. Since one without the other is impossible, he is paralyzed. The result of his paralysis is to foster illusion.
But what about Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Washington? Aren't they aristocrats? Don't they also enjoy special privileges?
The difference is that they are willing to subordinate these privileges for the welfare of all. They are statesmen. Bland He's just a man.
Well, just how do you intend to convince Colonel Bland of the correctness of your position?
If I can destroy his illusion, the unreal hope, he will see the necessity for action. He will convince himself.
Have you yourself no fears, Mr. Henry, such as you ascribe to Colonel Bland and others?
It would be modest, I suppose, to say yes. The answer is no. There is an image that I carry constantly with me to dispel all such fears.
And what's that, sir?
A free American nation in the world. A free American people in the nation.
But you must be aware that from the British viewpoint, that concept is treason, sir, high treason.
So they declare, but they haven't hanged me yet. One thing is certain, they can't hang us all. Will you excuse me now? I must prepare my thoughts for the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Since only the British position can truly answer the question of whether there is any possibility of peace, we take you now to London. Come in, Edward P. Morgan.
This is Edward Morgan. We're in the palace in London. King George is signing a number of royal documents on various internal matters. That is the Prime Minister, Lord North, standing beside him. In the last few days, there has been very strong agitation in Parliament for the repeal of the oppressive laws against the colonies and for the withdrawal, too, of the military occupation forces in Massachusetts.
You may address me now. I will be signing these favors and briefs here for at least an hour. Why every trivial appointment and pension must bear the royal signature, I will never comprehend.
We are most interested, Your Majesty, as to your present attitude toward the American colonies.
Our attitude toward them is now and at all times conditioned solely by their attitude toward us.
Was Your Majesty in any way impressed by the speech on conciliation which Mr. Edmund Burke made in Parliament yesterday?
Oh, yes. It was quite brilliant. If Lord North had his way here, he would imprison him for it.
I may yet ask Your Majesty's approval to do so.
Is it true, Your Majesty, that many petitions have been received by English merchants asking that you favor the various...
It is true. All that you have heard of wailing protest on behalf of these colonies, it is all true. We have been besieged from America at home and from half the world with requests, petitions, demands, and ultimatums.
And we are deathly weary of them.
What have we indeed imposed upon these, our colonial subjects, that is so difficult for them to bear? We have given them every advantage of empire, a flourishing trade, military protection, and the most humane and civilized rule.
We have always considered most generously all requests for alleviation of tax burdens and other such matters. But what these rebels are demanding now amounts to self-government and virtual independence. They are cursing my name in the streets of Boston. They arm in Delaware and Connecticut. They convene in seditious assemblages and organize committees to spread disloyalty and treason.
Then there is no hope at this time for conciliation.
The American colonies have for the past year been in open and secret rebellion. That is the unfortunate truth. What are we to do with defiance? Encourage it? I think not.
They must be made to understand that we will never relinquish our right to rule our colonies, whether this request be made through peaceful petition or violent demand.
Would Your Majesty affix your signature here?
Have we made our position clear to you, sir?
You will not withdraw your troops from Boston. You intend to enforce submission there and in all the colonies.
And what, pray tell, are these?
2 land grants, 1 pardon, 3 executions, and a royal company charter, Your Majesty.
Respect and submission from every last one of them. Once that condition is restored, we will be most happy to consider all loyal grievances.
Thank you, Your Majesty. There you have the British position on highest authority. We return you now to Ned Calmer in Richmond, Virginia.
The debate is still going on. This last speaker is Robert Nicholas, who has supported Colonel Bland's position against the Henry resolution to arm the colony.
And we can expect that they will act accordingly. I urge you to defeat Mr. Henry's resolution and await the decision of the Crown, which I am almost certain will be most favorable.
Colonel Bland, I believe we have heard enough debate. Let Mr. Henry speak now in final support of his resolution, and let us vote on it and finish our business.
Mr. Henry, the delegates seem impatient to hear you. Are you prepared, sir?
As well as I'll ever be.
Mr. President, the question before us is one of awful moment to our country. For my own part, I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. We are all apt to close our eyes against a painful truth. But whatever anguish of spirit it may cause, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst and to provide for it. What has been the conduct of the British ministry over the last 10 years to justify the hopes with which some of you gentlemen are pleased to solace yourselves? Is it the smile with which our petition has lately been received? And they did smile. But ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with the warlike preparations that cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sirs. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last argument to which kings resort. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne. We have held the subject up to every light of which it is capable. And it has all been in vain. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our subjugations, our supplications have been disregarded. We have been spurned with contempt from the very foot of His Majesty's throne. I say there is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve, inviolate, those privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle before the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sirs, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left to us. We are weak, it is true. When shall we be stronger? When we are totally disarmed and a British Guard is stationed in every house? Shall we acquire the means of resistance by lying on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall enter and bind us hand and foot? $3 million of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, in such a country as this which we possess, are invincible against any force which our enemy can send against us. The battle, sirs, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant and the active and the brave. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. The chains are forged. Their clanking can be even now heard in the streets of Boston. It is vain to extenuate the matter. Our brethren are already in the field. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. What is it that the gentlemen wish. Why do we stand here idle? What would you have? Is life so dear, so sweet, as to be purchased at the cost of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death.
Let me be buried on this spot. I move the adoption of the previous resolution.
I recognize Colonel Clarence.
Mr. President, I second the motion for approval and ask that it be made unanimous.
The wisdom of Patrick Henry's resolution became even more apparent when the news reached America that the rumors of conciliation were all false. Nothing had prevailed to change the policy of the king and his ministry. In the meantime, as a result of Patrick Henry's leadership, an effective plan was adopted for arming and equipping the colony, and contributions toward the relief of Boston were organized on a continuing basis. Less than a month after the speech was made, the British opened fire on a band of militiamen at Lexington on the road to Concord. King George issued a proclamation declaring the colonies in a state of rebellion and ordering their military suppression.
You Are There, on Tuned to Yesterday from the 17th of January, 1954 on CBS. And that brings to a close this hour of True History on Tuned to Yesterday. Be with us again next time for more great programs from radio's golden age. Until our next hour together, I'm Mark Lavonier. Thanks for listening.